Okay, hello. Thank you everyone for joining today. We're really excited to have you all at a 5 p.m. conversation on a Friday. So thank you for joining, and thank you for joining virtually as well. This is going to be really exciting to sort of hang out with some of our panelists and hear a little bit about how they've been engaging on the topics of multi-solving. So if multi-solving feels like an unfamiliar or new concept to you, we will be sort of talking through it today, particularly through the Global South perspectives of our fantastic panelists. I'm here, my name is Shalaka Jadhav. I'm here with Youth Climate Lab. We are a Youth for Youth Lab, headquartered in Ottawa, Canada. And we do pretty exciting work, which is kind of experimental. But essentially, we do a lot of capacity building work. And we're really excited about that because that's very much needed in the youth space right now. We're here to present a research creation project, which was created in collaboration with Green Africa Youth Organization. And you'll meet Josh soon from GAYO, as we like to call it, and it's a youth-led, gender-balanced organization that focuses largely on youth engagement in sustainability and environmental work. So we're really excited to present some of the findings from our research creation work, and this work was funded by the International Development Research Center, and we have today Santiago Alba from IDRC. So Santiago, I'll hand it off to you, and you can get us started. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody in the room, and I hope the ones online are not too late or too early in the morning or in the evening, so good morning, good evening to all online. It is really a pleasure to be here today and with so many panelists that are going to tell us. Let's go through two things. My name is Santiago Alba. I'm with International Development Research Center. I'm the director of the Climate Resilient Food Systems Program within the center. The IDRC is part of the Government of Canada efforts in international development, and we invest in knowledge, in innovation, in solutions to improve the lives of people. So we basically invest in research in the Global South, in the majority world. I want to start by challenging us on the title of the event. Don't we deserve better is something that the panelists will prove that we do, that you do. So do millions of people looking at us in Glasgow. But our right to a healthier planet, a more resilient communities, a more inclusive society, a more sustainable economy requires a transformation beyond building back better. We need to build forward better, because the systems that we built was what brought us here. The old model gave us a climate crisis and levels of inequalities never seen since the early 1900s. The climate crisis and the global inequality crisis are not two different crises, are the same, and unfortunately, they are defining our time. Extreme weather events are more frequent floodings, several droughts, cyclones, all are increasing and are a global phenomenon. They affect to all of us. They don't discriminate. However, how they impact us is part of the discrimination. Low and middle income countries are more impacted than others. And within those countries, the populations that already were facing inequalities, poverty, are the most affected. Women, girls, youth, indigenous people, marginalized communities. If you put on top of everything COVID-19, this is a complex interaction between different crises that actually became a barrier for our plans for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, of not leaving one behind, and also threatens everything that has been hard-won in the last decades and undermine any progress. IDRC is working with many of you across the majority goal to generate solutions that respond to all these present and urgent challenges with an eye on building more resilient, more inclusive, more sustainable societies, more sustainable economies and environments. We support action research, we strengthen evidence base that can help discussions and negotiations and decision makers We focus on reducing greenhouse emissions. We support public and private sector actions to build more resilient communities. And we promote active participation of women and youth in the solutions that affect us. Climate change holds not your future, but our present. Young people in particular are hostage of this crisis. And if you put in place that in only sub-Saharan Africa, 70% of the population is under the age of 30, the stakes that we face are even greater. As all the global nations and leaders discuss the measures to combat climate change, to find new pathways, to find agreements on net zero future, it's important that your voices, the voices of young women and young men, are at the table, that you actively participate and identify solutions. This will be key not only for a more sustainable future, but for a more inclusive one. There will be a lot of examples that we can give, and I suggest you that you go to idrc.ca and look at everything that we are doing, because it's really fascinating in the examples of people. More recently, 23 young fellows for 18 different countries have been funded and worked through the Global Center for Adaptation in Netherlands with support of IDRC, and they became part of the natural-based solution discussions in many countries. We have been also supporting youth consultations through COP and before COP, and et cetera, on the works that we do. I don't want to take you from the real experts here. Just a last message. What we are discussing today, what you are going to tell us, is not only how and why we deserve a better future, but how we can build forward better presents. So thank you so much for having us. I let you with the experts for tonight, and I think Joshua, you are going to be the one leading us in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Santiago. What I should start with is by saying that when you're talking about IDRC and you talked about the supporting young people and focusing on knowledge and research, I am a testimony of that. All right, I became a fellow at the GCA in March 2020. I led a global consultation on adaptation and young people and how different forms of activism needs to be accepted and tolerated across different parts of the world, and how to put young people at the center of adaptation. And through that, developing a strategy for the Global Center on Adaptation and driving that work of young people championing adaptation, because mitigation, of course, is very easy to highlight. And I feel very proud of that work that IDRC did. And I know many more young people need opportunities like that to, of course, expand their horizon, but also to become practitioners and experts in the areas that they are very passionate about. So thank you very much. And very, very glad to have all these amazing young people here with us today. The format of the session would be in a way that all 4 panel members have taken an active role in a consultation that has happened over the past 2 months. So they'll be sharing with us some of the insights from that consultation. And from there, we are going to open the floor for a couple of questions from everyone here and also a response. And to start with, there was one thing that I found very, very important, which is translating knowledge into action. So in no particular order, I'm going to start with you, Desmond, and I'm going to introduce the panel myself so that they don't take much time talking about all the amazing things they do. So Desmond is from Ghana, and actually Desmond is a youth advisory panel member to the CEO of the GCA. And I know that earlier today you had a meeting with the CEO where you were talking about how to translate ideas into actions when it comes to adaptation. So my question to you, Desmond, is in your communities, what do you think is needed for us to go through green recovery? What are the actions that could drive green recovery in your community?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's supposed to be working. I don't know why. Well, I would shout. And yeah, thank you very much. In terms of green recovery, I think that, well, we need to learn our lessons, right? From the time COVID set in, we realized that we had the whole world became to a halt, especially in certain sectors that we thought was driving the economy. And then we realized that rural innovation was what was really now sustaining people who didn't have to be connected with some of the fancy areas were the ones that are surviving. So I think that in terms of green recovery, we really need to restructure fundamentally the critical sectors that we had been not really paying so much attention into, especially when it comes to youth empowerment, when it comes to youth employment, when it comes to areas where young people have the ability to innovate and where young people have the ability to drive the conversation and drive the narrative.
Thank you very much, Desmond. So, talking about moving that conversation forward, I'll turn to Beatrice. And Beatrice, I know you've been one of the icons for the UNFCCC because you won the sort of Step A competition around adaptation with the work that you're doing in Latin America as a whole, but also specifically in Brazil. The question to you is, Desmond just talked about how to move this forward, right? But what is the role of civil society in doing this? So from your experience and the work that you've done, which won you an award with the UNFCCC Adaptation Committee, what are the elements that civil society has to pay attention to support in driving action?
Thank you, Dr. Josh and Desmond. Civil society has to shift the way we are doing policy, basically. And that's very related to the award Josh mentioned. My project basically is a civil society-led initiative to raise capacity and technical capacity on climate, specifically on adaptation cases, to our potential leaders, so candidates to the legislative power. And I believe that we need to strengthen these partnerships because civil society cannot be just the receiver of policy. We need to actively participate in policy making. And that covers not only youth participation, but all of our participation. We cannot just expect that representatives that are put in power are the only ones responsible for action, but we cannot always just push for them. We need to have this collaborative approach that will allow us to do policy in a new way that everyone feels empowered and can day to day be in this process, not only in the election moment, but in all times. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. And quickly to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you are champion in the Africa Youth Initiative on Climate Change, specifically in Zimbabwe. You're holding a lot of CSOs within Zimbabwe together on climate change. Do you think that that collaborative effort exists? And if it doesn't exist, what do we need to do to make it possible?
Thank you so much, Josh, for the question. I always say that there is power in numbers. This is my hand. I have 5 fingers. Imagine if I had 1 finger. What would I do with it? So there is always power in numbers. And what we have realized is us as AYIC alone, we cannot do it on our own. Even from the regional perspective, AYIC will need GAYO. You know, GAYO will need another organization because you find out that we have certain areas that we focus on. Could it be like right now we're doing the NDCs and a component of Action for Climate Empowerment. But if we are together, we can complement each other. So alone we cannot do it. And this is why we had to do a lot of consultation meetings so that we know who is doing what in the space. So it's always good to engage others. It's always good to accommodate each other's in our strength, in our weaknesses. And we've managed to reach out to our governments to support us with this. And right now, we now have a strong youth movement in Zimbabwe, not only basing on AYIC, but also considering other organizations and respecting, making sure that we are complementing each other's efforts so that we meet the goals and our vision as young people. Could it be in terms of adaptation or in terms of mitigation? So alone is really not possible. Together, definitely we can win the race.
Thank you very much. Together we can win the race. I think this is a race that we have to win. We don't have a choice. Irfan Ula, you're from Pakistan, and you started an initiative recently called Sustainability Week Pakistan. As a young organization, and hearing what founders and connectors and collaborators like Elizabeth are talking about, as a young organization, and you started about a year ago, do you feel like existing organizations, particularly the youth movement and development agencies, are opening up to young organizations and new initiatives? Or do you feel there is resistance and there's not appetite to work with new initiatives?
Thank you so much, Josh, for the question. To be honest with you, it's somehow challenging if you are new, new in sense that if you are new established organization or if you are just registered your organization. So first of all, it's a lot of, to be honest, bureaucracy is involved. You need to go through a lot of, in a lengthy process, because while registering my organization, it took me like about 6 months. And a lot of work was you need to do, like these different NOCs you need to take from different organization. So I think so it's, and it's also I think so important for the government to make this whole process a little bit flexible, and especially for the young people which are new to the sector, and they really want to do something good for the community. They are coming with some nice and innovative ideas. So I think so quite challenging for the new organization, and especially if we talk about South Asian context. So I saw a lot of colleagues, and they were also telling me the same story, that for them it was somehow challenging task to be recognized as an organization. So this on the government side, but on the donor side there is also challenging aspect, and the most important is when you want to approach them for the funding. So usually they ask you to have like experience of 5 to 6 years, and with the different areas which you want to implement. So I think so for a new established organization, it's quite challenging that you need to have like 5 or 6 year of experience to apply for the funding. So I think so that some of the challenges which really need to be addressed by this different government organization, donor, in case especially if they talk about youth inclusion. So then they really need to do and to implement what actually they want to see at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And these are insights, not just your personal stories, but being a representative voice from the workshop that has happened. At this point, I would like to announce that we have Ambassador Patricia Fuller in our midst, who is Canada's Ambassador for Climate Change. And we will have an intergenerational dialogue, just a little bit, so that we can pick her perspective on a couple of things as well. But before we do that, I would like to dig deeper into some of the findings before we start that dialogue for you to come in. I will turn to you, Elizabeth, right? One of the things that I want to hear, and I want the panel to be aware of, is around the tools that are needed to build the future that we need. And from the workshop that has been held, we know that, of course, this was a short-term project. We need more long-term approaches. But of course, there are different elements that prevent youth movement to have a very long-term perspective. So what do you think is needed? And I want you to really think around all the things that you heard in the workshop and bring that into perspective. This was a short-term project. It's not going to fix all the problems, but how do we translate short-term projects into long-term projects that really delivers the actions that are needed?
Wow, what a question. Okay, first and foremost, I think one of the things that came from the workshops, it was the way we are packaging our information. Of course, we are in the climate change space, as we understand what we are talking about. But if we are to reach out to the communities, the way we are packaging our information is very, very important. I cannot go to a community and start talking about the IPCC report. Of course, I can talk about it, but it's the way I'm going to package the information. The moment I start telling them about, oh, this science 1.5, keep within, they are totally lost, and we lose so many people. So meaning if I am to reach out to a 5-year or 6-year-old, I have to package that information in a much more different manner. If I'm going to reach out to the arts industry, I have to package that information so that they actually understand what exactly I'm talking about. I cannot start to reach out to the communities and just say, oh, we have the nationally determined contributions, they will not understand. But if I go to them, or if I'm to go to the business community with a strong business case that, you know what, we are producing a lot of waste, but we can actually get to improve our income, or we can actually get to create more greener jobs. You know, this is the language that a business personnel understands. So these are some of the things that came out of the consultations that we're having. Of course, we have the UNFCCC tools, the NDCs, the NAPs, you know, all of them. But when you're now reaching out to the people, because we are leaving no one behind, number one. So if we are leaving no one behind, we have to be careful with the way we are sharing the information. We have to be careful with the way we are engaging the people, because we want them to understand and we want them to be on board. So the way we share the information is very, very important. The way we communicate to people is very, very important. The way we communicate to different groups, even people with disabilities, is very important. Right now, if I'm to ask if there is a pavilion with a Braille, a book in Braille, etc., it's not there. So we are not also being inclusive of them. And we cannot win the fight if we are leaving people behind. Thank you.
Okay, Liz, you are knocking some doors. You are really beating to the tune of the drum, so that's a lot of things to take in. And now I was going to go to Ifan, but given everything you've said, let me change my structure a little bit and quickly turn to Ambassador Patricia Fuller. I mean, those were some really important stuff that Elizabeth mentioned, right? I mean, we need to work together and we need to be inclusive. What do you think is the role of intergenerational collaboration to deliver this? And we need to get a microphone to Patricia Fuller. And I'm brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, stand up? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you, Joshua. And it's nice to see you in person, because I heard about you when we were working on the Global Commission on Adaptation, and so nice to meet you in person. And it's very satisfying for me to see the results of IDRC's support for youth and engagement on climate change. And lovely to have the chance to hear from all of you. And I think it's so clear that we need youth voices in this conversation. So I just want to mention a couple of things we're doing on that in Canada. We have just recently, for the ministry where I'm based, which is Environment and Climate Change Canada, we're establishing a youth council for our minister to have a direct input into policy discussions. We have had for some time a youth council for the government of Canada, but now we have one dedicated to, or will have one very shortly, dedicated to engagement on environment and climate change issues. And then in the support we provide to developing countries, we've recently announced that we're doubling our climate finance to $5.3 billion, and Canada has been very strong in bringing a gender lens to our climate finance work, and as part of our feminist international assistance policy, to be ensuring that we reach women and girls in our development assistance. And I think there will be a lot of scope for inclusion of youth in our new programming as well. So maybe I can just come back on some of the comments that I've heard, and in particular the comments you made about the opportunities for employment related to climate change and to the kinds of jobs that will be part of the transition to a net zero world, and I think the idea here is I throw some questions back to the panel, right? So so I was having a conversation about this with some youth who are here from Canada, and they were making the point to me that and I think this relates to what I was just hearing now, that you know, we've got to make this real for people. And the point I was hearing was that as we think about the kinds of changes we need to make to address climate change and the kinds of jobs that will be created as part of this transition, that it's really important that youth are aware of what those new opportunities are and are feeding into helping to create those. So I guess the question I had was, as you think about all those kind of new areas that open up and clean energy and other kinds of efforts to address climate change, how can we make sure that youth are getting the kind of training and thinking about their futures from the perspective of what are those new opportunities that are opening up and how they can be part of that. So throw that question to our great panel.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to look at the youth panel and ask you a simple question, all right? I mean, do you have the feeling that we're making progress?
Well, I would say yes. I have a feeling that we are making progress, and I'll tell you why. For example, we would see that gradually, we have a lot of young people being involved. Comparatively, it's still not that much, but comparatively than before, which is what will bridge that gap, because I feel that a lot of young people have the ideas, they have the energy especially to deliver, right? So when it comes to implementation on the ground, walking the talk, we can rely on young people. And then they were excluded really at a very large scale. Now we can see traces of young people, of course. Sometimes it's just one representative in a room full of 80 people, but we're still seeing that gradually a lot of organizations are recognizing this, like we need to involve young people. And she rightly mentioned that now they set up a youth council that can have direct relation with the authorities to bring out the ideas from the grassroots level, and I think that can bridge the gap.
Well, I want to address both questions. So first, I think in terms of narrative, we're definitely having progress. And I think that this is something that especially Gonzalo, that's here as well, has been talking about. We shouldn't just look at the photograph of the current moment, but comparing it with all the progress that we've been having. And talking about youth participation, it's only increasing. And this year, especially from the Brazilian youth that's here, we have 80 people here from different organizations. And also in terms of Youngo representatives, we have like over 50 badges that Youngo was able to give to people. So that's incredible. But we really need to solidify this in action and to crystallize this in action. And we can't just keep talking and talking about that. Of course, awareness is important, but then we need these to be concrete to people. And as much as awareness is increasing, I feel like this is still limited to people with a lot of privilege. And when we talk about privilege here, all these negotiations are being held in English. All these very little of that is translated or interpreted. And this is a huge challenge, especially if I talk about my region from Latin America, and especially to Brazil. Less than 5% of my country can even communicate in basic English. So this is something we need to address. And we're not even talking about disabilities like Liz mentioned. So this is something that we always have to keep in the forefront of our minds when we are talking about climate. Of course, narrative is increasing, action is increasing, but not to the people that are the ones that should be involved the most. And they are doing climate action, but they are not even using this label. Of course, like indigenous communities, traditional people, they are doing climate action. That's survival to them. That's their basic lifestyle, but they're not using this language. And talking about opportunities, that's the second part. I feel like we're not getting there yet. Maybe in more developed countries, we're having more job opportunities about this, but in the countries that I've been involved with, in least developed countries, we're not using that much of this this narrative around climate. And what I can say is that youth is not waiting for these opportunities to arise. So that's why I see so many social entrepreneurs rising up and creating their own initiatives, even when it's super difficult to access finance and to access those structures. We are creating and paving the way to do climate action, even if we don't have enough resources. So that's something that I wanted to add there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. If there is nothing else from the panel about this specific question, I will look at the audience and I ask the same question. Do you feel we are making progress? And I want to hear from you. Do you feel we are making progress? You've been here for some days now. There's been a lot of pledges and a lot of talks. Just in this session alone, they've said their peace of mind. We've got Ambassador also tell us what the work that they are doing. Do you feel we are making progress? Please.
Hi, everybody. Ooh, sorry. I think that there have been a lot of very pretty, lovely sounding announcements that have been made over the past few days by lots of countries that give the impression that we're making progress. And I think that what's the expression? The proof is in the pudding when it comes to whether those commitments will be met, because we all know from the history of climate negotiations that voluntary contributions and commitments that are made have not been met. The $100 billion commitment.
Yep.
There are so many examples. And so I think it's really important not to be taken in by all of these wonderful announcements that are being made and saying we're making progress because there's more announcements until we see them actually coming through, and not to be deceived by all of these things that could be taken as progress. Slightly negative, I'm sorry.
Well, that's great, because what you're saying is that we shouldn't entirely believe what we hear. We should wait to see what is being done. Right. So that is a very good point. Anybody else from the audience who wants to share how they feel about everything so far and if we're actually making progress? If not, I'm just going to turn to the questions that were raised and the topics that were mentioned, the sort of compounding problems. And there, I would like to now introduce a central theme to the workshop that were run and the consultations that were run, which was around multi-solving. And to kick it off, I just want to hear from your perspective, what at all is multi-solving, and why was that even important for you to hold workshops around this? And I'll start with you, Desmond.
Multi-solving, it's, I think, the basic idea is that we need to move beyond very narrow focus approach to problems that we face, because we've used such approach before and we realize that we always end up solving one problem while creating a billion others, and then in few years you get yourself stuck in another situation. So multi-solving is actually taking a holistic approach to solving problems today, but at the same time you are anticipating future problems and including them in the plan. So you're coming up with such a model that makes it easier to twitch and makes it easier to suit multiple problems at the same time.
Great. Hold it there. So that is a very brilliant thing. What I'm trying to understand here as a next step is this already being practiced?
Yes, it is being practiced. And I'm saying this from the experience and the perspective from where I come from. But then when you look at global level, at the rate of scaling up solutions, I'm yet to really witness and be able to testify that yes, we are seeing this and that, because we've seen negotiations, we've seen discussions, dialogues at global level, approaches that we can actually say this has always been the same case. But then in the work I do in Africa, I work for GAYO and I also work for the Green Africa Youth Organization, where we have developed models that tackling circular economy approaches to waste management and mobilizing, building movements to solve a lot of problems at rural and national level. And we, for example, have one of the such projects that actually have drastically approached waste workers in their diversity, so including waste pickers, including the informal sector, transporters, managers, and all that, trying to sort of develop such a strategy where everyone find it so easy to locate where one exists, what's the capacity of that person, what exactly is the person doing, where is this person moving from where to where. This way, I mean, it's been never practiced in Ghana, nor it is practiced in any part of the sub-region that I come from. And that has been our problem, that we've always seen situations where government will loan out so much money and say, we put this amount into waste management. But then the next day, we put this amount into disaster risk reduction because we had flooding due to waste being choking our gutters and all that. So you could see that such approaches never worked. But now we are seeing a significant amount of progress because we're bringing everyone into one umbrella and they sort of see the impact right from day one.
Thank you very much, Desmond. Now, to the other three panelists, building on what Desmond just said, I'm just going to turn to you and you try to let us understand what will be the key principles for multi-solving from your experience and from the workshop that you held. And I know that one of the key products of the workshop is already sort of finalized and will be live soon, and it will be online for everyone to be able to read and access it. So moving forward, and I know some of these recommendations are already in the document and others can read deeper into it. But what are the key principles in making sure that we can practice multi-solving in projects, in organizations, in policy formulations, and in everything we do? Back on the point that Desmond made, in a way that we do not solve a problem today, and then next week we have another problem coming out of that. Irfan.
I think so about multi-solving. So the concept is already been implemented and already there in the community. And about the concept, about the factor which we really need to think about if we talk about multi-solving. So we really need to see the co-benefit of our intervention, that what there is any co-benefits, then we also need to look for synergies and trade-off. So I think so that could be the important factor which we really need to keep in mind while we talk about multi-solving approach. That, for example, and then also most important thing is the concept of maladaptation. In majority of the cases, it's happened that they say, okay, this is a project, it's a successful project, but maybe if we think in a broader term, so for example, if there is a project in an upstream area, and then we really need to see what could be the possible benefit on downstream areas. So there I think so this multi-solving approach play an integral role that we really need to kind of think as society as a whole approach and to have like a multi-directional approach to implement those different ideas and approaches. So talking about the multi-solving approach, I will give you an example from my organization, Sustainability Week Pakistan. So recently we are working on a project called boosting local economy through olive tree grafting and planting. So the concept like not looks so fancy, but when you see, so what actually we are doing with this project, so there is a region where they're having this like millions of wild trees of olive, but usually the people, I think so it's also come this awareness rising that how the people can and should use their resources sustainably. And there is also innovation playing an important role, that how they can bring more innovative idea to use the local resources in more sustainable way. So what actually we are doing in this project, we are helping them to aware on the importance of olive tree grafting, because there's like more than millions of trees in that specific region. So if we grafted them, so what it could do, on one side, it could help them to reduce the climate impacts, because those areas are also vulnerable to flooding. and we all know that olive trees are also a good carbon sink. But on the another side, it also providing job opportunity. And here this come these green jobs, like the people can have olives oil, and they can olive seed, and they can sell it to the market. But in our country context, because there's many region in Pakistan where we're having a burden of wild olive tree. I know the government is thinking to also kind of graft them into change them into a useful one. So that's here also, like my country is spending like millions of dollars in exporting in oil from abroad. So I think so here this come, so if they having the resources already there, they are so they just need to work on it. They just need to use it more sustainably. So I think so this is like a small example on multi-solving, but I think so there are so many areas that we just need to be to do a little bit research on it. Just need to see the multi-dimensional approaches.
Sure.
And I think so it could having a positive impact on the end.
Thanks a lot, Irfan. I think there are three things I take from what you said. First thing, synergies, right? We need synergies as a principle for multi-solving. This is very important. And the second part of what you were saying is maximizing internal resources, which is very important because, of course, we cannot always rely on external resources, and we need to look internally within us and see how we can leverage on what we have internally. And then awareness raising. So really thanks for those 3 points. And at this point, I would also like to acknowledge that we have a high-level champion, Gonzalo, with us, and very happy to have you here, and hope that you are sort of listening to some of the key remarks that are coming from our young leaders. And I know that a couple of days together with Nigel, you gathered civil society and you to consult with them, which is, I think, is a very sort of leadership principle to get different constituencies and groups into the room to help you with the work that sort of this heavy burden of driving private sector towards net zero, of course, and also championing adaptation and resilience. So thanks for being here. And I hope that you get the right people in the room. So you got to articulate your points very well so that they can push it forward. Now, Elizabeth, what principles do you think we need to take forward in terms of making multi-solving part of everything we do?
I think the gentlemen, they've already preempted everything. But you know what? One of the most important things is to make sure that we capacitate our local people. We really cannot start talking about, multi-solving without capacitating them. And this is in terms of technical capacity, research capacity. They need to know, right? And the importance of program exchanges, so that they actually get to learn what other people are doing. From where I come from, we have a problem of this weed, which we call water hyacinth. It's been there, and we cannot manage it. In as much as we have the environmental management agents, it has been difficult to manage the water hyacinth. But then we started, we were capacitated, and then it was just an experiment that we were working, and we got a few funds, and we started harvesting that water hyacinth. And because where our offices are based, we have access to horse dung. We have a lot of horses. And we started mixing that water hyacinth with horse dung to see if we can come up with a biofertilizer. And we started testing it, taking the samples to the lab to see if the plants that are growing are not affected by any elements from the river, etc. and stuff. And it worked, So this is the capacity that I'm talking about. We need, if we are talking about multi-solving, then we have to go all the way. Research is needed. We need to capacitate in terms of research. We need to capacitate our local communities in terms of the technicalities that are needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. I mean, this is very fantastic. Two things, right? Capacity, capacity, capacity. Then the next part of that is research and innovation. If we want to move forward, we should be able to open up the space to try new things. And I think here, of course, funders play a significant role, right? We need to be able to fund things we don't know whether they will work or not work. And I think there are just few funding that is out there for young people to try things that will fail. And I think that is a big problem because there should be resource to try new things for us to know what works and what doesn't work. Because if all we know is working, we wouldn't be here in the first place. We are here because there's a massive problem that needs to be solved, and we need new solutions and new innovations. So very, very strong message on finance to try new things and building capacity of local people. Beatrice, over to you.
Well, I think that the only thing that would complement it that I didn't hear yet would be to have an intersectional approach. Because many times the knowledge is there, but it's with another area. For example, a different agency in the government or a different organization. And this kind of connection for those conversations are very important for us not to be repeating ourselves or just reinventing the wheel all over again, because someone else from a different sector with a different perspective already created a solution or already has the data that we don't have. So this complementation is extremely important as well, and I see this happening in the government over and over again. And when we tackle climate change, that is an extremely complex issue. That's not only one sector that's going to have all the answers. And we need all those different actors in the same table talking about this to really have the multi-sectoral approach. So this way, we not only avoid having to waste a lot of time reinventing all the things that other people already know, but we also have, from this clash of different views, the innovation that we so desperately need. Because from our diversity and different ideas and backgrounds is where we will find the different paths that our limited view do not allow us to have this broader vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Keyword complementary, right? To do that, what do we need? We need stock taking. I mean, this is very important. Before we can complement, we need to stock take, and I think there's not enough of that going on. I had a chance to look at the reports that will be out soon from the workshop that was happening, and I was on a call with someone from IDRC, that was Martha, and a key question came up. One was, how do we all work together, and how do we put young people at the center of everything? And this is where your point comes in very strongly. I think that if development agencies don't know what each other is doing, you end up stressing with the youth. Because then I need to sign up to that program and sign up to the other program and sign up to the other program and spend a lot of hours, especially in this virtual period when COVID happened and there was a Zoom meeting every other hour. So there's a lot of stress on young people, of course, to be part of different communities, and sometimes you don't know whether you'll be hearing the same thing or not. So it's really, really important that within the community itself of wanting to work with young people and multi-solving and COVID and climate and green recovery, that there is a stock taking, who is doing what, and how can we complement. Thank you very much, Beatrice, for bringing this across. Now, before I'm going to turn to the audience and take a couple of questions and also responses, comments, whatever. We're going to make it a conversation soon. But here's a guiding question for that. How do we move forward? Right. What do you want to see, and how do we move forward? So, I'm going to give all of you again the chance. How do we move forward? And what do you want to see? And afterwards, I'll turn to everybody. Think about it. How do we move on from here? We know the issues. We have some ideas. Practically, in principle, how can we take this forward? Anybody can go.
I can start. I think the most important thing is to move from talk to action. And I also mentioned it yesterday in one of the events that there's so many declarations, there are so many policies and plans, especially for youth involvement. And also in NDCs, there is like many times they mention youth inclusion. But when it's come to the implementation, I think so there is a big gap. So it's not just about having in the NDCs, but it's also in other different policies and plans, but it's need to be implemented. So implementation is the key.
Thank you, Irfan. I still have questions around that because you said we need to move from words to action. How? Right? Implementation, how? I mean, thank you for that. I'm hoping that some of our audience could also come in on that. And please, whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about claiming our spaces. You know, it's very, very important. Okay, I'm not so sure. I do not want to generalize things here, but from where I come from, young people are not interested in policy issues, and this is where it all starts. I'll give you an example. When we were revising our NDCs, the NDC document was shared with other young people. I went through the NDCs. Well, I didn't really go through it, but I just typed the word youth. And there was only one paragraph which was mentioning young people. It was actually saying women and youth. And I asked the director if I could give my submission concerning that. And I wrote a one-page document. I opened it up to other young people to add their inputs, but no one added their inputs. And I told them that this is very crucial, and you really need to engage and make sure that young people's voices are heard. But I was only one person, you know. But I claimed my space. When the document was now finalized, I just searched and typed the word youth, and there was 13 words that came up, mentioning how the government is going to support youth, not only through consultations, but also in the implementation phase. So it is very important for us young people to claim our spaces and to be interested in policy-related issues. We cannot start talking about having good and sustainable projects on the ground if you're not interested with the policy, you know, because this is where it starts. It starts with policy, then it goes to implementation of projects on the ground, then it comes to income generation. So if we have weaker policies, then we do not have sustainable projects, then there is lack of income generation. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Wait, so to get what you said, you moved the NDCs and the policy document nationally from having women and youth to having youth about 30 times in that document. I think that deserves a round of applause. As a single individual, I mean, driving this and doing this in Zimbabwe, I mean, that is fantastic. So great work on that. Now, the question that comes to my head is, how do we get more young people to do that, right? Beatrice, over to you.
Throw the hardest one on me. But okay. I think that especially when you're talking about taking this to the global level and including more and more people, it's very difficult that all the youth in one country is going to be able to give inputs to a national policy or to an NDC. We really need to do vertical integration and to take this to the people. So a lot of what we talk about COP and all about negotiations, we think about bringing people to those spaces, but those spaces have to be taken to the people. So we need to capillarize this, and vertical integration is very important. So we take this from the international level to the city level, to the community level. We create more institutional spaces. We mainstream climate. And just like we have to communicate in a language that it's accessible to these people, we need to create the spaces that are accessible to these people. And, well, I'm going to do a little propaganda here of the work I do with Josh. We need to create more councils and forums and other spaces in the government that are accessible to those people and that have truly a way for people to contribute to policy making and to projects and to all of this. Because if we keep expecting people to take the initiative to go after this, it's very difficult. We will still rely on privilege, people with access to education, people with access to time and finance, and not the other way around, of us giving that to people that don't have that. Because the gap is only going to get larger if we keep expecting this kind of initiative and we keep putting the bar on the top and just assuming that everyone has those resources to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. And you've made the work very easy for me, because the moment you talked about councils, right, bring the space to the people, make it so easy for people who typically won't have access to the space to be able to contribute to that space, I immediately looked at Desmond. Because you have been part of the Youth Climate Council in Ghana, and you shaping some sort of a structure that works with every young person in the country to be part of decision-making process. Right. Can you just throw a little bit more light on that, with focus on how does that really help with multi-solving and bringing that into policy making moving forward?
I think that throughout this conversation, all that we've talked about, including what you mentioned in terms of funding youth initiatives and innovations, we've talked about knowledge, we've talked about capacity, and I think the last point we're talking about now would delve more about advocacy and awareness, because a lot of the young people who did not contribute are not contributing because, one, they do not even believe that if they contribute it will make any impact, and then two, some of them actually are not even aware of the process, so they do not know how to contribute to it. So I'm surprised you didn't want to really talk more about the Youth Climate Council, but I would add more knowledge on that. So with the Youth Climate Council in Ghana, it's been a whole several months process of establishing this and doing a lateral and vertical consultation and getting the right people at regional level, at national level, to make sure that whatever you say as a national government, these people are able to break it down, take it to the community level for young people who are individuals or who are in different groups are able to make contributions to this thing. And then it's then further taken back to the national government to try to mainstream youth activities in order to balance their aspirations, in order to balance their ambitions and their hopes in the documents that come out at the end of the day. This is actually something that we're hoping to make more global and not just in Ghana, because one problem that we've always had is that we lack that structure, like the Youth Climate Council that we are having now, where young people are able to point that this is where I send my ideas to, because not everyone will have direct contact with government or negotiated or anybody who is taking the action. So I think one thing that connects this with advocacy is the fact that it is not just a council sitting somewhere with government, but it's a council that is made up of voices of millions of young people at grassroots levels who are able to get their ideas mainstreamed upstairs.
Thank you very much, Desmond, for that. And I think there's a very important point that you mentioned, which we should acknowledge. There is still lack of trust, right? Young people don't want to contribute to the document that Elizabeth opened and said, hey, we can influence the NDC, you need to make input. They're not going to make it because they don't trust that that input will lead anywhere. And we need to overcome that. And for those who are not even aware of the process, we need to make them aware. So that awareness is also needed, which tells me there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. At this point, I'll look to the audience. Comments, questions, feedback. Anybody? Let's make this a conversation now. There's a lot that has been said by the panel. Please.
Yeah, thank you. My name's David Howell. I work with Gonzalo and Nigel on the Race to Resilience. Maybe this is a slightly challenging question. I've lived a lot in East Africa, particularly in Tanzania, and I'm not sure what the youth unemployment currently is in Tanzania, but it's probably something a very high and horrific figure, 20 or 30%. So if I was the minister there, or if I was a young person there, am I more interested in getting a job than climate change? And Mbaye, did you search for jobs in the NDC? And obviously we'd like them to be green jobs, but I think this is something where we need to join up agendas. But it'd be great to get your thoughts. And again, I met someone, I think it was in Kenya, I think, and he was driving a taxi and he had a really good first degree and couldn't get a job.
Yep.
And then you've got people with just leaving primary school or secondary school not having jobs. So what about jobs? Is that more important than climate change for a young person?
All right. In my local language, they say you have a king, then you have a guest, and there's someone who always stays between the king and the guest. But when the person is that close, the guy who stays in between will say that, Ken, you heard everything. So now you heard everything, right? What about jobs? Did you think around jobs? And I know that jobs and economic growth was part of the consultation process. So probably a good opportunity to highlight some of the things that you heard from the young people in the workshop, as well as putting focus into your personal work as young leaders. What about jobs?
Thank you. I really think that's a really very critical question. Personally, I actually wrote my thesis on following the NDC's process and trying to track down whatever the content is and in relevance to what society really needs. And jobs was really one of the critical things that, and I'm happy you have asked this. So in Ghana, for example, one of the things that we are doing is that we realize that national processes, whether it is the NAP, the National Adaptation Planning, or it is the NDCs, and most of the decisions that have been taken in preparation towards COP as well, did not really consider to a very large extent where do we have the leverage to create jobs that are that can be resilient, or jobs that can be scaled in this age of drastic climate change. And my work, again, I will end up always talking about this, but revolves around a lot of areas that has to do with rural innovation, work that people might have, or in many areas people have not given so much attention, including actually making sure that people create work out of, or jobs out of, the waste value chain, where they are able to actually earn income that is appreciable, that you can in a way call green jobs, because we are trying to close as many as possible landfills and dump sites, because of course also in relation to climate change, these are very toxic methane emitters that we are trying to close down, right? And if closing these landfills would actually directly create millions of jobs for people who do not have even, your friend had education up to degree level and driving a taxi, but waste pickers and people from my community do not even have high school education. But then they are still the people holding the economy, because they are salvaging these materials and getting income from it. So I think that's actually a key area to look at.
Thank you very much, Desmond. I think there's a key element to that, which is also resilience, right? I mean, you don't have the opportunities, you don't have the advantage, but still being resilient, and the spirit of entrepreneurship. I'm going to come to the other panelists, but before that, I'm just going to interrupt a little bit with the flow of this session, and we're going to get a photo with Ms. Patricia Fuller before she leaves, because I think that is important, right? I mean, you're a very busy person. We managed to get you here today, and I know that the panel also whispered in my ears that they want to get a very nice time with you before you leave. So we can do that quickly before you leave. Brilliant. I'm going to get myself in there, even though I'm not a panelist. Thank you so much. Great. Now just get back to business. Jobs, right? I mean, that's when you talked and I know the work that you're doing in Ghana, the informal economy, and people really leveraging on that to still create job opportunities. What I think is important in all of that is that, I mean, jobs. But what jobs do we want to create? What kind of jobs? Because I know that during COVID, people had jobs, right? But particularly all those jobs that you made reference to in the informal sector were not the kind of jobs that people needed to had before. Because all of a sudden you don't have a contract, you cannot go to job, and there's no social security, nothing. So you wake up one morning, rules change, and you're unemployed. You don't have access to credit, you don't have access to anything. Are those the kind of jobs that we really should be pushing for? Or we need a new set of jobs, and we need to formalize more of the informal economy that exists in Ghana and across sub-Saharan Africa. I'm going to turn to you, Liz, because of the context that I just created. What do you think about that, and to the context of, did you search for jobs in that document, or just youth?
Yeah, that is a very good question. But when we are talking about, okay, fine. First and foremost, I come from a country whereby 90% of young people are in the informal sector. Most of my colleagues that are here and that managed to participate in COP, if they were not in the climate change space, they wouldn't have been doing anything. So as I'm speaking, I am speaking from what I know and what I've experienced. And the document that we produced, we highlighted how young people are going to benefit from all these processes. It could be the NAPs or the NDCs, you know, the opportunities that are there within the agricultural sector, the energy sector through renewable energy, how young people can actually tap into manufacturing. As it stands, we import solar panels. And if they are not working, that's also another problem, because that's e-waste. We don't know what to do with it. We ship our e-waste to Dubai. We are shipping jobs to Dubai, you know. And these are some of the things that we want to address as young people. And we said, okay, fine. Why can't you invest into this? Let's invest into waste, right? Let's capacitate young people. Can we come up with ideas and capacitate young people so that they can manufacture the solar panels? And we stop importing the solar panels. The more we import, we are also contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not about any type of job. It's about making sure that these jobs are sustainable and they are green jobs. And it's also a matter of trying to identify what kind of new skill sets are needed. The world is changing fast, you know? And we're talking about a just transition. Will young people be ready? Are our parents going to be ready? So there's a need for a new skill set. Young people should be capacitated now. From where I come from, we cannot even start talking about coming up with electric vehicles. We don't even have electricity. But we need those new skill sets. We need to start positioning ourselves strategically. When the time comes, young people should not say, no, we didn't know about this. They should say, we've been waiting for this moment, and we are ready for it, you know? We can now operate the electric vehicles. We can now do this, this, and that. So I think this is what I can say, that there is need for new skill sets, and it's not any type of job. We are referring to green jobs that are sustainable. Even if we are to be affected by COVID-19, you know, people can be resilient. They are not breaking. They are bending, and they bounce back.
Thank you very much, Liz. Round of applause. Any more comments, feedback, or questions from the audience? Anyone? If not, we're going to play a game. And that's how we're going to end this session. We're going to play an interesting game. I mean, multi-solving, right? And there's a lot of things I've heard, and I've learned a lot from this session, even though I still work with all of you and I know half of your thoughts. You brought really new insights, which I really appreciate and is very, very fundamental. But this is what we're going to do. Ifan, you said something. You said we need to move the words to action. We need to implement. And I said the how, and we're all going to create that how together. How are we going to do that? We're going to use something we say sort of a storytelling approach, and we're all going to paint that picture for ourselves. And I remember when we met, myself and Beatrice met the high-level champions, Gonzalo said, don't look at the frame, look at the whole movie, right? Don't look at COP26, look at where we started, where we are, where we want to be. And I want to set that same scene. The conversation we've had now, the elements that it brought into the conversation, and where your thinking is now. We're going to tell a story about the future we want to see. Are we all ready for that? And there are a lot of people in this room, so it's going to be a long story, all right? And in the end, we should get to the point where we want to be. And I know that we still have about 15 minutes left, so no rush. We will finish that story, and we will get the picture we want. And this is how the game goes. I will start by setting the scene. I'm going to pass the microphone, and I'm actually going to start from this side. So Santiago, you need to get ready. I'm just going to give an opening. When I pass the microphone to you, you need to continue the story. Wow, I mean, we don't spend the whole night here, so. But we have 15 minutes. We want to paint the whole picture. So I'm going to start. You'll follow. It's going to go. And by the time we come back to Desmond, I want us to have the picture we want to see by, say, 2030. Right? Multi-solving, skills, implementation, right? Synergies. A lot of keywords that we heard today, right? Take the space out of here and take it to the people who really need it. So I want you to think about all these elements, and once the story starts and the microphone gets to you, you need to feed into that with your thinking, your energy, and what you want to see. So here's the thing. It's 2030, January 1st, right? And let's say that there's a young lady called Josephine who woke up. And Josephine hears on the radio, there is a flood coming. Right. This is it, Santiago. Now the floor is yours.
And Josephine says, oh, I knew this was coming because I've been expecting for this. And she goes and wakes up her husband and say, pick up the kids.
Good girl, Josephine. Not only does Josephine know the flood is coming, but she also knows what she needs to do and how to support her family to go to the safe place, which is not far, thanks to infrastructure that's been created in her village to help protect not only people but also their infrastructure from the flood.
Josephine's kids are also ready. They're also been learning with across generations with their family about what's to come, and all the family are communicating about their roles to play in responding to the flood.
These plans have been co-created, across generations, across years. And as they are getting to where they're going, they're talking about how they're going to keep each other safe and what's going to come after, because they're ready.
Okay, and now after discussing how they are going to keep each other safe and how they are going to be ready, there is another cyclone that is now approaching, and now they have to actually now prepare for more action, how they are going to survive the cyclone that is approaching, because it has potential to actually destroy the infrastructure that has already been built and which has been called being resilient. So they need to have plan B.
I would say not only is the family ready, but the government is ready too. They have sirens even in the most remote places to warn people of the floods and the cyclones and anything else that comes. And they have backup gear and backpacks and stuff ready for people who do not have these, safety book bags or, gear to be prepared.
She's very optimistic.
Not only are Josephine and her family safe and sound, but also all of the people in her community that have disabilities and mobility issues and chronic illnesses that usually are not included in evacuation programs, that usually do not have the same access as Josephine does. As well as that, she is aware that the loss and damages from the floods and from the cyclones are financed internationally, and so she can look forward to reconstruction after the damage has happened.
Thanks. And actually, Josephine lives in a developed country called Ghana, which is actually now giving assistance to this other country called the United Kingdom, which hasn't taken all the action it should have done.
Josephine has traveled for her holidays in East Africa and Burundi, and is enjoying that the community has access to clean cooking energy, and that the future is better for all the community.
While the family were in Burundi, children want to go to play, and they find there or football stadium have green energy, and in terms of reducing consumption of water, there was some eco-friendly system to keep all things clean and green.
Okay, Josephine's family, they are now sharing their experiences with other countries so that they can be able to cope with the disasters that they are going to face.
Okay, I have a plot twist. So the next day, after Josephine and her family has returned home, there is actually an impromptu town hall, and Josephine and her family go to report about the conditions incurred from the flooding and the cyclones, and they find that the city councilors and the mayor have a rehearsed speech that has nothing to do with the original intentions of the actual town hall.
Okay, I'm going to let people think about that plot twist for a while, and I'm going to continue on the old plot twist, which is that because of the engagement of youth in climate change, there is sufficient tradespeople that can rebuild the community after the flood because they've been trained and educated in climate action and the trades.
So Josephine isn't that worried about the town hall sort of change because she has educated her kids and there is an availability of communication between the youth and the governance, which didn't exist 20 years ago. So she's now mobilizing them to put their voices back to the town hall and shift things to the way they should be.
Josephine isn't worried about how she's going to feed her family because of forward planning. They have food security, they have great food supplies, and that's made secure and resilient so that it's able to withstand the impact of all of these storms and the crops and the access to the food supplies that they have is just perfect.
And Josephine also is as an advocate for early action, anticipatory action to disasters in her community. She has advocated for financing to actually start small businesses in her community for climate resilient infrastructure and nature-based solutions. So she's actually a young entrepreneur for her family with a new livelihood.
Josephine was so upset about the town hall, she eventually ran for president and became the first female president. It's now a couple of years later and her country is running well because they built a resilient agriculture system because they realized that the crops that were there on the floods were not supposed to be there, and they built a farmland that was local and insourced all their farming and all their production. And yeah, Josephine for president.
So we so we take from here. Okay.
All right. Okay. And actually what was forgotten to be said is that all the traditional and indigenous communities in the country are the ones leading all these nature-based solutions innovations. So it's definitely something not top-down, but the community is being empowered and part of this process and integrating scientific knowledge with traditional knowledge as well.
Now that Josephine is president, she has invested so much money into research, climate change resilience, empowering young women because they are most vulnerable, and also young people. Yeah.
So yeah, Josephine also know the value of coordination during this, because from her experience, he saw that there's not well coordination between different organizations and the relief activities, and also in prevention and mitigation. So now she's also focusing, and it's also in her priority list, how to do adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damages. Yeah.
And some of those adaptation measures that Josephine, as a president, have come up with is to build resilience homes on the sea and on the lakes in her country.
Guys, there's no better way to end the session than this, right? This is the story. This is the future we want to see. Even though it was a story, I picked out very key elements, and I'm going to go through all of them. Every one of you said something which I picked a key word from. One, disasters are going to happen. We can't prevent them, right? There's enough climate change. They are incoming. We have to be prepared for that. But there's going to be a safe space, right? And this is the future we want, knowing where to get safety. And it reminded me of Cyclone Idai when it was about to hit and communities don't know where to go. We need to fix that. That has to be fixed. Next, protection of critical infrastructure, right? Getting safety for people is one thing, but making sure that communication is working, water is working, sanitation is working. This is important. Kids and family knowing what to do. When disasters strike, they are the first respondents. We cannot rely on this country flying in and that country flying in and this flying in. First respondents, the people themselves need to know what they have to do. And you told me that. These are all things you told me. Now the next thing is that actions need to be co-created by different generations. This is the future we want, right? And then cascading effects. This is going to happen, and hence we need early warning systems. And those systems have to be inclusive and applicable to everybody. And then we need loss and damage finance. That was a big blow. Thank you for bringing that in. We hope that by the end of COP26, we're going to get something on this. Clean cooking, green energy, renewable energy, fantastic. This is the future we see. Water conservation, that was important. And then building new skills, right? And saying knowledge and sharing knowledge so that those who have built resilience will be able to share for others to be able to learn from that. And a key pillar of adaptation and resilience is knowledge sharing. So that is very important. Right communication, right? The kids will not care what whoever is saying on the radio when it is not right, because we are all grounded and we are communicating rightly and we know where to get the right information, and together we are all fighting fake news. That is important. Forward planning, resilience, right? Forward planning, forecast-based financing, early action, this is important. You told me that. Entrepreneurship and nature-based solutions, that is very important. But the most fantastic part of the story was we all need to be engaged in policy making, right? We cannot leave the decision making to someone else. We have to be part of it. Are you guys going to run for president? Brilliant. Because that's what we want to see, right? Josephine is president. You guys have to be president. And of course, I get invitation everywhere and I get a nice treat. So that is important. Then indigenous communities, being part of that solution, and financing to make that happen. And lastly, again, loss and damage. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this conversation. It was really fantastic for you to share your thoughts with us and for the panel to share their thoughts too. Thank you very much.